Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion here at Pacific School of Religion. Thank you for joining us for this latest in our Lavender Lunch series. My name is Bernie Schlager, and I serve as Executive Director of CLGS. Today, we will be hearing Dr. Sylvia Rue and Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow speaking on reproductive justice in Black queer bodies. Just some housekeeping details, if I might. This event is being live streamed on Facebook and will be recorded for later viewing. The chat feature, however, will not be live streamed, nor will we post it. And then we have an ongoing request from some of our attendees, if you would not blur your background or use virtual backgrounds. That makes it a little bit difficult for folks when it comes to visualizing and watching. So again, welcome. I think we have a larger group of students gathering together in the Baudet Museum here at PSR. But let me give a fuller welcome to our speakers for this Lavender Lunch. Again, the title is Reproductive Justice in Black Queer Bodies, a Lavender Lunch with Dr. Sylvia Rue and Roland Stringfellow. In this lunch, they will explore how in this current intersectional moment, we can educate ourselves on the critical issue of reproductive justice and better advocacy for Black queer people. Let me give some biographical backgrounds, if I might, for our speakers. Dr. Sylvia Rue is Faith Education and Outreach Coordinator at SisterReach, a Memphis-based grassroots nonprofit organization that supports the reproductive autonomy of women and teens of color, poor and rural women, LGBT plus and GNC folks and their families through the framework of reproductive justice. Dr. Sylvia Rue is Faith Education, and I just read that, a coordinator. Also, Dr. Rue is co-founder of the Black Gay and Lesbian Leadership Forum, and she co-produced and co-directed the 1996 documentary All God's Children, which dealt with African-American family and religious values, civil rights, and homophobia. Other films produced by Dr. Rue include Women in Love, We Have a Legacy, and Women and Children, HIV and AIDS. Dr. Rue has also served with the National Black Justice Coalition from its founding in 2003 as a board member and director. In 2006, she helped organize the Black Church Summit in Atlanta to promote acceptance of gays and lesbians in Black churches. Dr. Rue has also worked for the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Rights and as director of Equal Partners in Faith. She has also authored many articles, including contributions to the Huffington Post and other publications. Welcome, Dr. Rue. We're honored to have you with us. Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow is coordinator of the African American Roundtable here at CLGS. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Education and a Master of Science degree in Counseling from Indiana University, and later earned a Master of Arts degree in Ministry from Grace Theological Seminary, and in 1990 became a licensed minister in the Baptist Church. In 2005, he was ordained with the Metropolitan Community Churches, and in 2006, earned his Master of Divinity degree from Pacific School of Religion with a certificate in Sexuality and Religion. And in 2011, Roland became licensed with the United Church of Christ and the Fellowship Churches, a predominantly African-American denomination with a special outreach to LGBT individuals. He has worked as a pastor in Indiana, California, and Michigan. In addition to all of his work within church contexts, Roland has also worked in the field of education in a variety of capacities as teacher, guidance counselor, college advisor, and vice principal. And Roland is currently based in Detroit, Michigan. So I welcome the two of you. Welcome to each and every one of you. And I will turn this over now to our speakers.
Well, again, we're so very pleased to have you all here on this very important topic on reproductive justice and how that intersects with not only Black bodies, but Black queer bodies. And so, as you can probably tell from our introductions, both Dr. Rue and myself identify within the LGBTQ community. And so we'll speak from that perspective. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend and sister, Dr. Sylvia Rue, to begin us off, and then we'll go into some questions and then open it up for Q&A from each of you. Dr. Rue.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It's such an honor to be here today. I'd like to thank you for giving the introduction of SisterReach and what it is, and I'm going to add a little bit to it to talk about its mission. SisterReach's mission is to empower our base to lead healthy lives, raise healthy families, and live in healthy and sustainable communities. And this is achieved through working through a four-pronged strategy: education, policy and advocacy, cultural shift, and harm education on local, national, and international levels. Now, I'd like to say a word about reproductive justice and go into a little history on the term. And it's a term coined in Chicago in 1994 by 12 Black women. And reproductive justice was created to center the lived experiences of Black women around issues of reproductive and sexual health. The framework is grounded in Black feminist theory and human rights. Central to reproductive justice theory is the universal right to dignity, self-determination, and autonomy. Reproductive justice centers the people whose liberty has been violated and whose social and economic well-being and culture has been deliberately ignored, and seeks to liberate and emancipate vulnerable populations from all forms of reproductive and sexual oppression. The reproductive justice framework challenges to expand our analysis beyond abortion to be inclusive of the myriad of issues that preclude women from achieving reproductive and sexual autonomy. Now, I'd like to tell you what the 6 core principles of reproductive justice are. 1, every woman and individual has the human right to decide if and when they will have a baby and the conditions under which they will give birth, adopt, or parent. 2, every woman and individual has the right to decide if they will not have a baby and their options for preventing or ending a pregnancy. 3, every woman and individual has the right to parent the children they already have with the necessary supports. Parent the children they already have with the necessary social supports in safe environments and healthy communities, and without fear of violence from individuals or the government. 4, every woman and individual has the right to bodily autonomy, free from all forms of reproductive oppression. They have the right to express sexuality and spirituality without violence or shame. And they have the right to a quality of life and sustainability before and beyond the ability to give birth or parent. Those are the 6 core principles. You want me to, because we could go to our first.
Are you ready for your questions now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So the first question, so do you feel that those in the Black community, specifically the Black church, are resistant to the message of reproductive justice? If so, why do you think this is the case?
Okay. Well, I will tell you this. The word justice resonates positively with Black folk. But the resistance, the more global resistance, comes from the church's inability or difficulty dealing with sex. I've often said that the church has AIDS, and I don't mean acquired immune deficiency syndrome. I mean absolutely ignorant about the divinity of sex. I've spent years, I mean a lot of years, working with Black clergy and congregants on convincing or reminding them that it was actually God who gave us the gift of sex and sexuality. And every single part of the human body, our brains, our hearts, our eyes, our hands, bones, muscles, organs, senses, and genitals are part of God's plan for the expression and existence of life. And Jesus said, I come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. And an abundant life includes a healthy sexuality, and sexuality is holy. And we need to get our churches involved in a healthy way with their attitudes and, about sexuality, about reproductive justice, and healthy, successful churches need to have adults who are knowledgeable about human sexuality. People who are sex positive and can talk to youth and young people about sex and their peers. So too often, religious systems, especially in Western society, have separated sex from the sacred. Our sexuality has been in contention with that which is considered to be holy. You know, it's not like God created humans and took a coffee break and then the devil snuck in and put in the genitals. In fact, our sexual organs are some of the highest thoughts of a God who loves us. And we have a sacred erotic core. It's an indelible part of our humanity. So talk about resistance. A Black minister once said to me, he said, well, the Bible is black and white when it comes to sex. And you're talking about the gray, and we can't deal with the gray. And that's the resistance. We can't deal with the gray. Well, humans don't live in the black and white or gray. We live in the multicolored rainbow of life. So for too long, sex and sexuality, orgasm and pleasure have been demoted from the spiritual realm to that which is considered lower and base. And to counter this notion, I posited a new definition of orgasm that brings spirituality into the equation, because sex and spirituality are mutually synergistic energies that feed and nourish each other, and they should feed and nourish each other. So my definition is orgasm is the kiss of God that brings ecstasy to consciousness in a grand and grateful moment of earthly abandon.
Ooh, can you repeat that?
Okay, everyone says that, and then they want me to
Yes.
spell it. I'll say it slower. Orgasm, the kiss of God that brings ecstasy to consciousness in a grand and grateful moment of earthly abandon. That puts the two together, because we bring God into it, not just saying, oh God, when you come, but really the spirituality and the sacred erotic core of sexuality. And these are some of the resistances that we have fought, because people don't want to put it in the realm of the sacred. So, you know, I'm a sexologist. As a sexologist, I learned that sexuality is wired into our brain, and our wiring is not chosen. And the way our hearts beat is not a choice. As humans, we come into an awareness of our orientation as we grow into young adulthood. Sexual orientations are deeply embedded themes in the orchestration of being human. The overriding reality is human beings do not choose their sexual orientation. A person's sexual orientation has already been determined by the time one can name it and claim it. And what the leaders of the religious right fight against is people realizing that the state of LGBT is being a normal, morally neutral variation of human development. And we all know, or we should know, this simply means that one who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender has the capacity, if they're so blessed, to be in companionship in deep and profound ways with another person who may be of the same gender. This is an eternal truth that the anti-gay religio-political complex has found does not serve them well. Our truth has more currency than their lies. I think it's important to understand that and realize it. I'll say it again. Our truth has more currency than their lies. Sexuality and sexual orientation are gifts from our Creator that allows humans to express the mysteries of their sacred erotic core in ways that can lead to a fuller experience of one's humanity. Laws, beliefs, and anti-LGBT programs need to reflect that truth. Sexual orientation is a gift that should be celebrated, not berated or eliminated, and that's the truth. So the resistance is not so much to the ideas of reproductive justice, but to the realities of basic humanness that are hindered by a dogma that need to be changed to bring sexuality back to its natural sacredness, to love more and to be allowed to freely love, as our Black queer bodies demand and deserve and should have access to for all of our lives. And the basic organizing principle of SisterReach is to have an abundant life. So I want to repeat, remember, central to the reproductive justice theory is the universal human right to dignity, self-determination, and autonomy. Reproductive justice centers the people whose liberty has been violated and whose social and economic well-being and culture has been deliberately ignored, and seeks to liberate and emancipate vulnerable populations from all forms of reproductive and sexual oppression. So Black folk should be on board with this message. So do you have any input or questions?
Yes, that just opened up so many other questions. So before I really get to my second question for you, to go a little off script, what are some of the programs or outreaches that SisterReach currently does? Because I imagine that many of the people here today are unfamiliar with its work and its outreach. And so I'm wondering, because I know you do some programming, particularly around religion and faith, but not so much your program, but just in general. What are some of the programs that they do?
Okay, SisterReach has, well, can I talk about some of the faith outreach that we have? Or do you want me to do it?
It's all open, yes.
Okay, well, we have a preacher series, which Reverend Stringfellow was part of this year. Every month we feature a minister and a topic, and it's usually at 2:00 in the afternoon, Central Time. And we're going to have one with Bishop Joseph Tolton this Friday, which is going to be about liberation. We have SisterReach Youth Ambassadors. We have Boy Talk, which is for masculine of center women.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. There's some feedback, I think, on your end, Dr. Rue.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if it's paper shuffling or that it stopped. So whatever that was. So, okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
Okay, Boy Talk is, all these usually are monthly, is for masculine of center women to have a place to meet on a monthly basis. We have on a monthly basis, it's virtual, and we have a speaker come in, we have a topic, and we have a person of the month. We have Womanish is for women who are mainly queer women who want to talk about their issues, and they have a speaker and a person of the month. We have Reproductive Justice Training 101. We have reproductive justice and faith. We have a reproductive health facilitator. We have vacation body school. We have a comprehensive sex education town halls. We do research. We have what we call a policy department, where we do research on all the laws, and there's so many laws that are against the queer bodies and against women, like the fetal assault law. We get involved with comprehensive sex education in youth, but and we're working with an attorney in Memphis to teach youth about the laws that are affecting their lives, because we're trying to work against the school to prison chain that happens. And let's see, what else do we do? That's basically, we have, because new programs are coming all the time, but we try to be spread out and broad as we can. And we just got invited to a panel on sex education and reproductive justice. That's going to be held in Memphis in a few weeks. And we've also been invited to talk about sexual violence and sexual assault on a panel. So we get called on a lot of things, and I think we do a good job.
Well, clearly your outreach is very, very broad. I've known you when you lived on the East Coast. I've known you when you lived on the West Coast, and you have roots in Canada. But this work that you're doing now is based in the South, the U.S. South. And I'm just kind of curious, was that by intention of the organizers of SisterReach to be intentional in the South? And how has those conversations been different from maybe having it on the various coasts?
I don't want to give the wrong history, but I think the director's mom wanted her to do this work in Nashville, Tennessee, and the South. You know, Memphis is a blue city in a red state, and the laws are draconian, and the South. You know, well, let me tell you something about the South. You know, there's up South and there's down South. And what we live now is a Confederate culture, but especially in the South. So what the need is the need's great everywhere, but very much in the South.
Yeah, indeed. So up South, down South, how do you distinguish those two?
Well, during, you know, I was around this in the civil rights era, and people would say, oh, you know, you go north of the Mason-Dixon line and things are better. But Black people find out that some of the same racism and challenges that are above the Mason-Dixon line are the same. So there's, you know, there's not that much of a distinction between up South and down South. Down South, they may be more blatant, but up South, it's like we used to, or they used to tell us, you know, in the South, if you're Black, you can get as close as you want, just don't get too big. But in the North, you can get as big as you want, just don't get too close. So that's some of the things.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So another question I have is, when it comes to intersectional issues, how do you see the intersection of reproductive justice and LGBTQ equality?
Okay. Well, the systems are intertwined. As we work to get equal justice for equal souls, they're both related to basic justice issues, and they have many points of intersection, Roland. There's the striving for equality under the law, for equal marriage rights, sexual rights, reproductive rights, and basic human rights. And the intersection meshes and intertwines with all the believers in basic human rights, because that intersection is on the right side of love, which is something I've told a lot of the ministers against us. I've told them, look, we're on the right side of love, the right side of history, and the right side of justice. And that's where the intersections meet.
Indeed, indeed. So oftentimes when you think about people in the church, they see this issue of reproductive justice and abortion as being anti-God. So how do you respond to that concern of God being anti-choice?
Okay, well, thanks for asking, because I have the answer right here about is God pro-choice? I don't know if everyone is familiar with an evangelical minister named John Pavlovitz, and he had a mega church, but he noticed that the people in his white congregations, people in his congregations were increasingly more outspoken in their belief that Trump was the savior, and that Black people were, as some people said, ungrateful, belligerent, and needed to know their place. And he just saw more and more white nationalism coming into his evangelical setting. And it was so bad that he quit the church and he became an author. And he wrote something that I think I would like everyone to hear. It's so brilliant. And the question is from John Pavlovitz: is God pro-choice? So I'm going to read you what he said. And he said, this shouldn't even be a conversation. The idea that America is here at this place and time in our planet's history, still debating whether or not women should have autonomy over their own bodies, shows that we aren't maturing or progressing or evolving as a nation. It also shows that millions of people of faith here are defiantly defying God's primary will, because Christians of all people should be unequivocal in moments like this. God is pro-choice. And we know God is pro-choice because the Bible tells us so. If you believe that God exists, and if you believe in Christian scriptures to be your primary guide in understanding the character of that God, you'll find out pretty early on that free will is kind of a big deal. The opening chapters of the book of Genesis describe in poetic language God speaking all creation into being, fashioning out of dark and formless chaos every radiant bit of this planet and its inhabitants, all the light, shape, and color of the disparate beauty here. And whether you're a believer or not, you likely know the Genesis story. 6 days of grand artistry, 6 days of spectacular displays of creative power, a boatload of animals, 2 people, a 7th day of rest in its very goodness, followed by 1 tree, 1 piece of fruit, 1 serpent, and the mess that follows. The heart of the creation narrative is God giving human beings the right to determine their own path. They are divinely endowed with self-determination. They are co-creators of their own stories. They are not mindless robots or blind sycophants. They get to choose because God wants them to choose. God doesn't choose for them, and other people don't choose for them, and the government doesn't choose for them. Anything else is a form of slavery, and God emancipates people from all kinds of captivity. Though not a literal account, the book of Genesis presents the maker of all things as creating every member of humankind inherently good. Excuse me, I'm just getting over the COVID. I have to cough. So I have some of the COVID. I'll say. The book of Genesis presents the maker of all things as creating every member of humankind inherently good, specifically original, and able and qualified to decide who they are and what they do and how they move and live and breathe through this life. For professed Christians, it is antithetical to that God's intentions to attempt to legislatively control a woman's body because the higher law says that she is in control of it, period. There's no biblical precedent or scriptural justification for a person of faith to partner in any human-made law that supersedes the free will of a woman. This isn't about abortion. It isn't about the semantics of pro-life or pro-birth or anti-abortion labels. This isn't about the minutiae of when you believe life begins. Those are diversions from the central issue at hand. For professed Christians, this shouldn't be about debating anything, but whether or not women should be allowed to have what God has already given them, choice. And for any supposed believer who claims the Bible to direct them, arguing against a woman's right to choose is arguing against the very heart of God as depicted in the scriptures. John goes on to say, I'm a Christian man and I am pro-life in the sense that I'm pro the lives of women, having autonomy over their own bodies. Beyond that, I yield to what they do with that autonomy because I, nor anyone else, should have jurisdiction there. As a Christian, you're entitled to believe that life is sacred. I certainly do. You're entitled to believe that embryos are sentient human beings. I disagree with that assessment. But you're not entitled by scripture, any scripture passage or any biblical mandate, to legislatively force your will upon another human being, no matter what justification you make for it. If you want to argue that, you're fully welcome to. You're just going to have to take your agenda above me and above anyone else to a decidedly pro-choice God. I love that.
That is powerful indeed.
Yes.
Would you mind telling us again the name of the article and the author again?
Yes, John Pavlovitz, Pavlovitz, and is God is pro-choice, or is God pro-choice, sorry.
Very good. Thank you so much. So at this time, we're going to open it up to any questions you might have for Dr. Rue or myself, and we'll be happy to respond. Thank you, Bernie, put the link to the article in the chat as well. So you can unmute yourself and share your question, or you can even put it into the chat. Well, while we are waiting, Dr. Rue, you made mention, it was also in your bio as well, of being a sexologist. And so over the years, in particularly seeing trends that have come and have gone, and again, according to your bio, you were a sexologist, you know, around the time you got your degree, around the time of, you know, when Roe versus Wade was, you know, first came into being. And so what advice, I would say, particularly from a sexologist standpoint, would you give to clergy in terms of having these types of conversations within their congregations about reproductive justice?
Well, number one, the conversations have to happen. That's how we learn, that's how we grow. They can get in touch with SisterReach, and we would help them because we do trainings. That's one resource, that's one major resource. And are you talking about just anyone in a church listening say, what can I do besides get in touch with my organization?
Right.
I think that they can see who they should do. You know, you should have an assessment of what you know and what you believe and what wisdom you have that you can give to other people, and know where your limitations are. So, you know, we have to examine our own beliefs, because we don't want to put incorrect information out there. And we want to advance the cause of justice and reproductive justice. We want to advance the cause, so we don't want to do anything that would harm the progress of that cause. So I would say study yourself to be approved, to learn about it, and to get expert advice. There's plenty of written materials out there. There's plenty of hopefully videos, and as I said, SisterReach is always a resource. But I think that it's like you started out saying, the conversation, and that's the key. Have the conversation, and don't expect to be the expert on everything, because we're all learning. Yeah, and I'm 75 and still learning, and you know, I'm never going to stop learning. So it's not like people have the magic words out there, but we need to study and learn about it, and then make the world a better place for yourself and the person next to you, and get in touch with lawmakers to help them understand why they have to pass laws that do not impede on people's justice. We're talking about Black queer bodies, talking about women's bodies. We're talking about the humans that are here, that we have to take care of and help them have life more abundantly. That should be our mission, as it is SisterReach's mission, that you may have life and have it more abundantly, to quote Jesus.
Good. Ms. Ann put a question in the chat, and she asked approximately how many anti-choice legislation initiatives are on the books or pending, particularly as we're facing the midterm elections.
Well, I can't tell you the exact number, because our attorneys show me reams of legislation across the country. I mean, I would venture to say easily hundreds, maybe more, but I'm not in the policy department, so I couldn't give you a number, because they're trying to keep up with the numbers themselves. But I've seen their printouts, and I said, are you kidding?
Indeed, indeed. Dr. Abraham.
Thank you so much. I have a question that I ask often when we have discussions about bodily autonomy and choice for women. I am from India, and as you know, the issue in India is the abortion of female fetuses only.
Right.
So the process for identifying gender is called amniocentesis, and the aborting of female fetuses is obscene.
Yes.
Just in the 1991 census, I know it's 30 years old. That's only because I've not kept up. I just can't bear to. But just in India alone, the number of female fetuses that were aborted was 13.3 million, which is the government figure, which means that it's quite twice that. And similar numbers, similar horrific numbers in China. So my question is, how do we create the possibility for transnational feminisms where the issue is murkier than, a simpler argument, I would say, and a lot of us speak in this way, but I'm very interested in how to speak about the possibility of transnational feminisms, because a lot of times when I talk about this, American feminists, retreat as if it's a challenge to their argument. And my thing is, I'm a feminist. I'm worried and seriously concerned about the lives of women and children and girls in India and in China and many other parts of the world. But I don't know how to get American feminists as, in a partnership relationship, because the domestic issue is so horrible too.
Yeah. Well, I understand exactly what you mean, because sometimes in our work, we have trouble talking to some women in the same field about issues they feel are more important than maybe Black women, what they're going through. So what you're talking about is patriarchal, specific infanticide of female fetuses. And because I remember reading about this sometime, because when you're talking about the studies, they said there were how many millions of women missing on the planet from India and China and other countries, millions, and it's making an imbalance of the male-female ratio on the planet, which is problematic. And I just, I would tell you to try not to get too discouraged with people's boxes that they've kept themselves in, and try to help them see beyond the parameters of their own personal interests, because what's happening to women in other countries is horrific, and that we need to do everything we can to stop it. But remember, we live in a patriarchal, male-dominated society, and the number one target of that is women and femaleness.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
There's another question in the chat. Are there educational resources you would recommend for seminarians and those training for religious leadership in particular?
In what part? In what particular?
In terms of reproductive justice and a more progressive way of looking at it.
Yes, and I don't have the list in front of me, but if you want me to look into that, I can send it to you, and you can make it available.
Yeah, and or do you also maybe can point us to a particular place too that you know of?
For information on this, I would just suggest you call women. Excuse me, coffee. Call us again and SisterReach and see what we could information we could give you, because that's really it's kind of a broad question, and because I'm working on so many things, I can't be as specific unless I look into it.
Mm-hmm. Good, I appreciate that. Going back to SisterReach, when was it founded? And you make mention about someone had was working with their mother, or I remember I heard you use the word someone's mother.
Yeah, our director,
yes,
Therese Scott's mother, is a beautiful, brilliant woman who I think she lived in Memphis and wanted Sharice to start something. What we have also, her name is Pearl, and it's Pearl's Pantry, and we give out food and clothing to the community people. So it was founded in 2011, and it was founded in October of 2011. So we're now into, this month is our 11th anniversary. And was there something more specific about that?
Well, just, I mean, it just sounded like there was a story there. I didn't know if you could expand upon that.
Yeah, my problem is I don't want to give the story incorrectly.
Okay,
I really don't.
understood. What do you feel, Dr. Rue, in terms of your own previous career has kind of led you to do this particular work? I mean, it seemed like there's been all these various intersections of this, and it seems like it's one of the more perfect positions for you, but just kind of curious, you know, we heard your bio, but just kind of wanted to hear it from you about how you were uniquely positioned for this work today.
Well, you know, you have to look back at my history of activism. I met Martin Luther King in like 1964 when he came to Los Angeles, and I made a point of meeting him. I had an audience with him, and I became, he said I was part of his unofficial welcoming committee to Los Angeles. I've always had a heart for activism. From there, I was doing anti-Vietnam protests, animal rights, women's rights. I'm friends with Gloria Steinem and Florence Kennedy and June Jordan and Angela Davis, and just kind of old stalwart lions from the 60s and the 70s, and it just never stopped. Activism has given me my life. So I've been on the front lines of many movements, and I'm still going. But what brought me here was my love for women and their bodily autonomy, my love for LGBT people and queer bodies, and the safety that we must try to keep them in. And I just have a heart for activism. So I became a sexologist because someone told me I could. And I said, well, you can get a doctorate in this and something that's fun that you like. Oh, that's great. So I did that. And then I became a filmmaker because of what I was learning at getting my doctorate in human sexuality, because they had sex education films, or what they called sex education films. And they were, remember this is 70s, and they were horrible. And I said to myself, I can do better than that. So I did a film. And that's how I became a filmmaker. So I did a film, All God's Children, with Dee Mosbacher. And that there was an award-winning film back in 1996. And it still got legs, although it's hard to get. But, you know, that film, and that's how I became a religious scholar. But that film, when I took it around the country, people would say to me, hey, you know what? Now I can go home for Thanksgiving because I showed this to my parents. And I could go home for Christmas because I saw this film and they understand what I'm going through. So, and that's how I became a religious scholar, because I decided to write a book about my experiences taking All God's Children around the country with hearing stories like that. And then when I got to the chapter on religion, even though I was raised a fundamentalist and went to a Bible college, when I got to the part of religion, I said, oh, I don't know enough about religious studies. So I immersed myself in religious studies, and sort of, I knew a lot, having been raised as I was, but, and when, like I said, did go to a Bible school, but I knew I didn't know enough to talk to people about it. And so one thing kind of just led to another in terms of activism. You know, I helped start the National Black Lesbian and Gay Leadership Forum. I was on the beginnings, the board of the National Black Justice Coalition. And activism activates my life, and it's keeping me young, and it's keeping me vibrant. And so it's been a progression of movements, a progression of activism, a progression that has led me to Memphis to work for SisterReach, and that's where I am today.
Fantastic, fantastic. Just want to call to people's attention in the chat. Various people have been listing several resources in terms of how to talk about this to religious communities, so you can check those out.
Good.
If there aren't any more questions, then the final kind of two questions that I have for you, Dr. Rue, is based upon the work of SisterReach. What would you say are some of the more common concerns or issues that Black lesbians bring up around this topic of reproductive justice, and also trans women? What are, obviously, there's some overlap, but there's some distinct differences. And since this is a specialty of SisterReach, what are some of the top things that you can speak to?
Well, here's the thing. Lesbians can get pregnant. Some lesbians want to get pregnant, and some lesbians don't want to be pregnant, like forced into pregnancy. And that's a big issue. I was pregnant. In fact, Roe v. Wade was passed in January of 1973, and I was impregnated by a psychiatrist at King Hospital at that time. And I did not want to have his baby. And so, reproductive rights and reproductive justice are just as, because we're women, are just as relevant. Doesn't matter if you're a lesbian. You still need the right to have bodily autonomy, and not to have forced motherhood. And no woman wants her womb to be the property of the state. Trans women are unfortunately not understood even by some LGBT people, and they want the bodily autonomy and to be respected and to be understood, and that it doesn't matter if you're able. We say people who are able to give birth, because that takes
some
it
trans
up.
men are able to, yes.
Sure, yeah. So we say people who are able to give birth. So the people who are able to give birth have the right to give birth or not to give birth. Like I said in the 6 principles of reproductive justice. So it's all intertwined in wanting to have our bodies be respected and be protected. And that's what we work for, because they're not respected and protected on this planet. And we have to work together, and it's a lot of work to do.
Indeed, indeed. Allow me just to read this final comment from Ms. Ann, that Letitia James Portis, a PSR alum, is very involved around issues of reproductive justice work in the Atlanta area. Also, she comments on the work of Rebecca Todd Peters' book, Trust Women, a Progressive Christian's Argument for Reproductive Justice. So great resource, and great resources that you have given to us, and great food for thought. We appreciate all of your insight, Dr. Rue, and your career that has led you to this place.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be able to speak to people, and it's good seeing you again, Roland.
Indeed, indeed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rue and Reverend Dr. Stringfellow. Just some reminders for everyone. Next Thursday, we have our 13th annual Georgia Harkness online lecture with Rabbi Professor Julia Watts-Belser speaking on queer crip revelation. And then next Thursday as well, we have, with our Latinx roundtable, we have Reverend Dr. Eric Thomas speaking on Sal Luz y Azúcar, Africana Queer Christopoetics of Matthew 5 in Afro Comunidad. So please be sure to join us. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Rue, and thank you, Reverend Dr. Stringfellow. And thank you all for joining us. This recording will be put up on our social media sites within 48 hours. Thank you, everybody.
Blessings.
Bye-bye.